Welcome to the TuMeke podcast. I'm Matt Jeffs. I have a very special guest today. I can't wait to get to talking to. This is Dr. Alicia Turner. Welcome to the TuMeke podcast, Alicia. It's good to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here, Matt.
Is it okay if I call you Alicia and rather than the formal Dr. Turner?
Absolutely. Please do.
Oh, awesome. Well, I wanted to start out by acknowledging that you and I are going to be at a master track roundtable in AI ergonomics at the Applied Ergonomics Conference in Orlando, Thursday, March 20th at 10 a.m. And I'm excited to share the stage with you.
I am as well. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. It's going to be good.
Yeah. And this is something that I found exciting because we come from similar backgrounds professionally, and we've kind of traversed that road. I'm always interested when a colleague kind of follows a path parallel to mine, and we were like, hey, you did that too. So I wanted to start out by getting into the story with you. And for our listeners, I should mention, you're a doctor of physical therapy by trade and by profession. And we've both put in long years of study and all of that. And I wanted to get from you, if you would share, like, what was the turning point that made you step away from conventional clinical care and start focusing on upstream injury prevention? I'll bet there's a moment, or maybe it's a string of moments. Share with us that background.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So mine's more of a string of moments and learning more about my personality. So it's kind of a both. So loved being in the clinic, had great colleagues, really enjoyed it. But, insurance constraints, treating to the insurance regulations was just increasingly frustrating. Instead of being able to pick, hey, this is the best care for this person using my judgment, I have to worry about units and billing and coding. And so that's a frustrating and kind of demoralizing thing. You graduate with stars in your eyes and then the real world hits you, right? So that was something that I just found, this isn't right. But what really got me was seeing someone on back surgery number 5, knee surgery number 4. I had the thought, man, if someone could have only taught them the hip hinge 20 years ago, if someone could have only showed them some glute strengthening, and I would even have them tell me, why did no one tell me this? Why did no one teach me this thing? And, you feel powerless, right? So it's something where, hey, from this day forward, we're going to get better. We can reverse some of this damage, rah, rah, rah. But I would feel like if I only could have a time machine and go back. And so really had a heart for prevention. And so I got an opportunity. And then the other thing about my personality is I learned that I don't like to show up to the same place at the same time every day. Like, I was in a semester to semester thing with school, and that was awesome. But when I got into the real world after a few years, I thought, like it's, Groundhog Day, right? Every day. Yeah. So I've learned that even just with the way I'm wired, and that's something we don't talk about enough in school, is doing like a personality assessment. What works well for who you are? I love novelty. I love to have different challenges, be in different environments. And so that's not something I've just kind of realized that in the past few years that, hey, so this is such a perfect fit for my personality and my wiring, as well as, so I got an opportunity with a major aggregates company, actually, I'll say the name, with Martin Marietta, to do some work at their quarries in prevention and education. So I was able to leap right from the clinic, and they're an incredibly cutting edge, safety forward company. And so I was spoiled rotten that's where I got to start in my ergonomics career. But here we are 10 years later and still loving every minute.
I got to riff on that a little bit because you mentioned something. I follow different accounts on social media, and I'm very much interested in alternative education. And, also the whole premise of neurodiversity.
Yes.
And I realized, I was probably all those labels they throw around now before it was a thing. And no wonder, like you say, that staying in place and everything. So anyway, one of the alternative education sites mentioned that. They're like, what were the most memorable things in school? And I replied, I was like, field trips. Field trips were great. I still remember the field trips. I don't remember those years of droning, sitting in rows of desks. But I do remember when we went to this factory and we went to that factory. And I think you're touching on it there. It's sort of like, you get a chance to go on field trips for work. So that diversity, that novelty you mentioned, I think you hit something there.
Yeah, it does. And it's stimulating and craving, because even if the patients are different, overall, it's very, very similar what you're running into. So this has been such a great career that's allowed me to, and you know this well, the challenges are different within industries, within companies. I mean, it's a novel challenge every single day, and it's really rewarding to be able to do that. So
it is. When I used to teach some of these elements, I would often try to get clinicians like us to understand, when you pull into that parking lot, that plant there, that paper plant, that's your client, that's your patient.
That's right.
That's your patient. And then the injuries that you encounter within, those are the symptoms of the patient. Mm-hmm. So you get to use the same skill set. You're just using it at different scales.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, we've talked before, and we talk and mention about how there are ergonomic companies out there that they're kind of working both sides of the equation, and they profit from a steady stream of injured workers. Let's face it, they do.
They do.
How do we shift mindset from that reactive care, which frankly does burn our colleagues out, does burn us out, especially as you described, when you're wrapped up in this third-party reimbursement world? How do we shift that mindset into a protective care and maybe true prevention? Do you have any ideas and thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that it's a huge challenge, because a lot of times these companies that are treating, they'll offer ergonomics to get their foot in the door at a free or sharply discounted rate. So I bump up into that. Well, this guy down the street told me this. And so, the whole American healthcare system, that's a talk for another time, but it's reactive, right? It's a reactive, and everyone wants a quick fix. They want the pill, the shot, the surgery, the immediate fix. Well, the truth is that sometimes it takes time, and it can be messy, and there can be many layers to it. And so, yes, that's something I don't understand, how a company doesn't see that clear conflict of interest, that if your revenue is generated by injuries, how on earth are you incentivized to eliminate them? That's something, that I speak to management and people hiring personnel about, and safety managers, to say, listen, I have no incentive for one person to get hurt. There's no acceptable number of injuries for me. 0 is the number that we're shooting for. And so when I come in and do this program, and Matt, like, you can't do a good true ergonomics program without getting dirty. You're going to get your hands dirty. It's a lot of work. You got to crawl around sometimes and get into some nasty maintenance rooms and get paint and grease. I can't tell you the number. I stopped wearing nice pants because grease and paint, who knows what, all over you. And so, a lot of times when I see these more surface programs that are just, it's really to check a box. And so trying to talk to the employer and say, are we just checking a prevention box, but not making any changes? And so really trying to shift that mindset to say, you guys, tally up what you've spent for your workers' comp. Have your premiums increased? Are they dropping you as a client? I've seen that happen a ton. What are our direct injury costs? And then do you understand what your indirect injury costs are, right? Which are often 50% more than the direct costs, right? What is lost? What is the more downtime? What is the decreased productivity? How much do y'all need to make? For one muscle strain, a company has to make $2.2 million in revenue to account for the direct and indirect cost of injury. I mean, so do they really know these numbers? And if you come in and spend far less than that up front, we can eliminate injuries. And so that's kind of that mindset is, guys, cash you don't even see is just flowing out the door. But if we can get in here ahead of the curve and stop these things, it's going to save not only money, but pain and time. And your workers are going to have improved morale. So
Yeah, that's the classic, that's one of the things we run into is some outfits out there use ergonomics as a loss leader.
That's right. And
so they'll use it as a reeling in sort of. And frankly, they may or may not do the greatest job because they're not, like you say, incentivized it. If they're getting it on the injuries on the back end, you got to ask yourself that. So it's interesting that you delve into some of the things we see in some of the models out there, like total worker health. And I know TuMeke also has a productivity calculator on top of.
Very helpful.
Yes, because you have to make that case. as you just described, there's layers to this.
There are.
And what we see on the surface layer isn't the whole story. So you delve into it, it sounds like, and help educate clients and people about, what's out there. And I love your reference also about like what you have to wear and everything. You're talking to a gentleman who has toured the Southland in processing plants, poultry processing. So I've gotten things on me I'd rather not describe. And you do. A really great colleague first introduced me. We went on this tour together. And he explained to me that, it's going to take a few showers before you get this essence off of you, and stuff like that. So I'm right with you, but I still wouldn't trade it for anywhere in the world.
Totally not. Yeah.
As far as the work we do. And one of the things that I do, again, I appreciate about your approach and why we have you here today is, the way you use the power of explaining, the power of why, the power of how. You emphasize teaching workers the reason behind their movement. That's the essence of a physical therapist is that, look, here's why you're doing this. Here's how, but here's why. What are some of the most effective ways, if you don't mind sharing some of your toolkit, that you found to get their buy-in?
No, that's a great question. I think it's crucial for any buy-in is you've got to tell them why we're doing what we're doing, right? So I position myself. So something about me, I'm a lifelong learner. I don't know everything. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be learning. So I try to enter into a place with humility and with a collaborative mindset. Y'all are the ones out here 12 hours a day doing this job. Some of the hardest workers I've ever met, unbelievably strong. So I position myself as, hey, I've got some expertise, but we're going to collaborate. We're going to work together to come up with solutions. So I think they can sense that. And so I say, guys, and I'm coming in with some stretches and some movements, but let me show you the anatomy of your back because I don't want to insult people's intelligence. Talk to them. Oh, I'm the doctor. No, that's not who I am. The only person that calls me Dr. Turner is my mother. Okay. So I'm just Alicia. I'm here to teach you. And so I get a picture of the spine. I say, this is what the bones look like. Here's the nerves. This is the disc. And this is why I go crazy with extension. This is what happens when we flex over time. Here's where your disc moves. And like when the light comes on in people's eyes, Matt, it's the most rewarding feeling in the world. And they go, oh, and what I've had many different places is people come back and they say, I took these exercises home and did them with my family. I showed my kids and I was like, there is no greater buy-in in the world than someone taking something from work and doing it with their family. And so trying to explain to them and also just to encourage people that I think, so many doctors, you've heard this time and time again, like, oh, I had an x-ray and he said it's the worst hip he's ever seen. Right? Or I have the shoulder of a 90-year-old, or I'm never able to do X, Y, or Z again. And people just get these mindsets that they're broken and they're defeated. And so part of my role and my job in this is to say, no, you're not. And there is always room for improvement. There are always ways we can get stronger. And so trying to give people hope, really. So to try to collaborate and instill hope in them is really where I just see the buy-in.
I love it. We learn the best of us in our field. Learn that it's education mixed with activity and or exercise. Exercise, that's formal, but I don't want you spending your life counting reps. Exactly. This is a transition to get you into more informal things, and it becomes your lifestyle. And I love how you describe that, and also the hexing that goes on when they go to some providers and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the worst hip, the worst back. I used to run a rehab department for an orthopedic group, and the director once said to me in a loose moment, he said, the MRI machine downstairs from us was, in his words, not mine, a money printing machine. He says, patients go in one end and money comes out the other. And I nodded and smiled and chuckled a little bit, but I was like, that's out there. And it is. And it's something, there is a mindset that the average person or worker or environmental health and safety professional or manager, they don't realize what's behind the scenes. And so when you have a chance to educate people and say, no, it doesn't mean you're broken. It's your spine's gray hairs. we could do MRI on everybody walking around. Guess what? You're going to find bulging discs on totally asymptomatic people. And yeah, it's really an education effort, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. It's an
That's
uphill battle, but we're
yeah.
fighting
Oh,
a good
yeah.
fight.
But I feel the tide changing. I think a lot of things have come out in recent years, and I'll leave that there, but people are starting to question more and more, and good for them. You need to be an informed consumer. You need to be. And I don't only mean the worker. I do mean the environmental health and safety manager. I've got some good friends who are clients of mine, and we have these very targeted discussions. They're up on it. They're realizing, ooh, we have to really watch who we send people to and what their motives are and everything.
Absolutely. People can't get away with stuff as easily nowadays. So
yes. Yeah. They're wising up, and it's really a good time for that. So when we get into things like hands-on ergonomics, you're not just analyzing data. That's what I want people to understand. Right. You're out in the field, you're pounding the pavement. And to me, to use that analogy earlier, the field trip, as we learn and we teach others, we're like, there's nothing like feeling the heat of a commercial kitchen, or smelling the fumes of a commercial welding lab, or hearing the high-pitched whine of a commercial automotive facility. And, these things are really, when you're out in the field, you're not just memorizing things, you're learning, you're experiencing.
Yes.
What's one of the more unconventional or creative solutions that kind of came upon you when you've been in a setting like that? You've come up with something just on site. It might have been a bolt from the blue, or it might have been something that just kind of, the spidey sense talking, whatever it is. Share. Do you have any experiences like that?
I do. So as I mentioned, I have a lot of experience hands-on in rock quarries and aggregates. And so, there's nothing like the sound of a jaw crusher crunching the huge rocks, or the trucks dumping the rocks, or the blast going off. It's been such a neat thing to get to experience. And so in the quarries, they have control tower operators. And so long ago, it used to be a big thing of buttons where they controlled every single conveyor individually. But in the last, 15, 20 years, it's become all computerized. And so these guys are in a unique situation. So I actually one thing about getting your hands dirty and getting out into sites is you see things that I don't know who the last person to see this was. So I stepped into a control tower, and there was a Nissan Altima seat welded to a steel box with no armrests.
I love it.
And I was like, excuse me, what is this? Who? And they were kind of proud of it. Like, they did it. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's neat. But how long's that been here? Maybe this is time for a change. And so, in this situation, there's windows on either side where they have to be able to look out at the conveyors to watch the product, and they're controlling everything. So one of the things is, we can be in our ivory towers and say, you need a foam mat and a standing desk. And, no, that's not reality. They'll say next. And so in that situation, they're in this car seat. They're reaching all the way down for the mouse that's down at a normal height desk from 1962. The monitor's completely in the way, or down out of the way. And I thought, this is just killing their necks, their backs, their shoulders, their wrists. And so what we were able to do is get one of the higher stools. We had on-site welders, because those rings that come on the stools, when you're wearing those heavy steel-toed boots, they're no good. So weld a larger ring on there, and then we actually were able to raise the computer up in the corner. So I have clear vision on the site, and then get a platform that actually attaches to the armrest of the chair, where they can have a joystick-type mouse. So now they're up. They're supported. We still got the 1962 desk in there, but we're making it happen. We get the Ultima seat out, and now we're able to say, hey, you can also stand, and you can use this joystick. Let me teach you some cervical retractions and some ways to rotate the stool rather than the twist you had to do in the still car chair. And so, just being able, you have to be creative, think on the fly, think with money being, a big factor in it. And so anyway, that was one that I was proud of, is that we really changed their entire work setup.
What a classic example. That, that's one of the things we learn in ergonomics is to look for those homemade responses and those homemade answers. You might go into a place and you'll see foam padding duct taped along an edge where people are leaning against that edge, or homemade tools. And, as you just described, it's not always good, bad, either or. Sometimes you watch it and you go, that's not a bad idea. Let's see if there's something on the market that's similar to that. Or by golly, when I was at this paper plant for 6 years full time, we'd look at some of those things and say, hey, maybe we should craft a tool that actually looks like that or does that. And I'm not excusing the Nissan Altima chair. I'm laughing with, not at, because that's
it was better than what they had in there. No, I agree. And often those things tell a story. And that actually reminds me of one more. I was in a cabinet factory about a year ago, and the employees they had their frames and they were gripping them continually. And so I was watching them, they had all different things that they were trying. And they said, man, if there was only something where it would hold the frame in place for us because they were wiping with a rag, right? To wipe the stain. Because instead they're gripping the entire time they're doing the wipe. So I went home and went on a mission to find something, and it did not exist. So my dad has a wood shop. I found a tracing for spring clamps online made out of wood. So with spring clamps, some bike handles, a rubber band, and some rubber glove tips, we made a spring clamp that would not damage this product, that they could squeeze once and then just hold in place while they did their wiping, and only squeeze when they're moving to the next. And so I said, I can't find it online. We're just going to make it, so you're trying to be resourceful.
That's it. And you've just described how you work with the workforce, because again, one of the words I wanted to tie in on that you said earlier, that word was humility. You didn't say it, but you implied it. And you were just like, I'm not the doctor.
Yeah.
I'm a colleague. I have a different way of looking at things. Together, we might come somewhere. And you and I could share war stories all afternoon, but this is kind of germane. At the paper plant, every big reel, these are SUV size reels of brown paper or white paper.
Okay.
And every other one a sample has to go to the lab to make sure it meets all of the criteria, the tensile strength and the thickness, et cetera. Every now and then one fails. And if it fails, it's got to go through this big blender out to the wet end of the machine, a football field away, and be reset. Well, anyway, we were having a lot of the guys, we were looking for the right kind of box cutter that had, well, anyway, they made some nice ergonomic ones, but here's the difference. The guys were doing, they're brute strengthening it. So they were one arming it all the way down this 12 or 14 foot length of this thing, cutting into this slab inches at a time. And then the paper would roll off and it would go into the blender. The ladies were two-handing it. So because they were smaller, lighter, not as heavily muscled, they had a technique. And so we called it like a pistol technique. We said, hey, you guys, you want to hold your box cutter like the ladies do.
That's right.
They're using the struts of two arms. And they're basically that's being shared by two limbs instead of one. And these are some of the things when you have that humility and you work with a workforce, they teach you things and you teach them things. Isn't it fascinating?
It is fascinating. I love to learn from them. It's really enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, and to your point, circling back where we began, you don't get into a lot of this in the conventional clinical life.
No, you do not. No, you just don't.
Let's talk about AI. This is the TuMeke podcast, of course, and you've been an innovator. You've been the head of a forward-thinking field of ergonomics, and now you're already into AI and computer vision. And you've said to me before, it helps reinforce what you're doing in the field. Can you kind of share that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've loved my experience with TuMeke, and what I like to say about it is that it gives other people PT eyes, right? Because you and I, with our training, we'll watch someone do a task, and our brain is saying, that's a lot of stress here. His shoulders flexed a little too far, right? We're doing those calculations, but if you don't have that training, you can't be expected to see that. And so what I have felt is the power of those videos, and having, as you know, doing rebas and rulers and Nash by hand are just tedious and horrific. And it takes forever. And so being able to quickly compute that, pop that video in there, and in real time, turn to the safety manager and say, watch. I mean, people's jaws hit the floor. It helps with buy-in, and it cuts through me having to explain it.
Yes.
Right? I can say, we're worried about this moderate risk task, but hello, let me show you this video and say their REBA score is an 11 out of 15. This is a high risk task. And then when they have that concrete quantitative information in front of them, it's not like you can just say, oh, it's not a big deal, right? So it's really helped me with buy-in, with management, but it's also helped people understand, hey, wow, this is something that we need to address. We want to bring these tasks down to a safer level. We want to teach people how that they can move safely, and having the computer vision, and as well as the speed, the AI helping fill out and doing those assessments has just been unbelievable.
It's pardon me for getting a little this digression, but it's the OODA loop. Here's what I mean by that. That's Agile and Scrum methodology. So, back in the day, I learned, and still germane, the PDCA loop, the Deming cycle. And because I worked so many years as an ergonomist and physical therapist in manufacturing, so I needed to know that. But then Agile and Scrum came along, and I learned about the Boyd cycle. And Boyd was the guy who literally wrote the manual on Top Gun. So he actually explained how observe, orient, decide, and act is you're literally iterating in real time. And that's what makes a good Top Gun pilot, is that when your opponent is responding to your first move, you're already on to your second.
Right.
And that's what you're describing with that picture worth 1,000 words. It's sort of like, look, I can scratch this all out on a clipboard, but actually, here, let me show you.
That's right.
And you're right. They see it in real time. And it's like, now let's make this little adjustment. Now look at it again. Whoa, and that's kind of the era we live and work in now, and why it's kind of excited to be in this line of work, isn't it?
Oh, it's very exciting. And I mean, it really is at the forefront, and AI is shaping the future. And so, I want to be on the bus with it, using it.
Yes.
So that's what's really been amazing about being able to use TuMeke.
Well, you also have an approach that, again, I believe it comes from, and it may just be you inherently, but I think it also has something to do with your professional background, is more empowering versus policing.
Correct.
So you want to ensure that ergonomics isn't seen as this just another top-down corporate mandate directive, but is as a tool that truly benefits workers, and frankly, more bottom up, or maybe meet in the middle. Do you kind of see things in that?
Absolutely. Because nothing's going to fly if it's just policing. And if it's perceived as policing, they're going to do the bare minimum to check the box. They're going to be resentful during it. Because Matt, as you know, mindset is more than half the battle, right? We can stretch and exercise and have the perfect setup, but if we're defeated and discouraged and don't feel heard or seen or validated, injuries are going to skyrocket. Pain is going to skyrocket. Productivity is going to decrease. And so when I come into companies, that's something I ask them. Hey, what's your attrition rate? What's your absenteeism look like? Like, I want to get a feel. How is the morale at this place? Because Matt, and as you know, when something that I try to do as much as possible is avoid that train the trainer, where I'm just telling them and then they go off, because so much gets lost in translation. I'll do it if I must, but as much as possible, I want to be interacting with the person. I want to talk to them, and I will not just talk, I want to listen.
Yeah.
So to me, listening to what they have to say and understanding where they're coming from, interviewing people, taking the time to do these observations. I'm sure you run into this when I go out on sites. People come to me and they say they're paying me to come help us. And the gratitude is just overwhelming. There's a shift in morale from me standing there, not even doing anything. And people stand better, and they're more efficient, and they're doing their job better because they feel like someone cares. And so for me, the importance of going in there, listening, taking morale into consideration, that's where we're buying in the engagement. People are feeling like, like we've mentioned earlier, the understanding the why behind the how. and the why behind the what is huge. And then the other flip side of that is I've several times, you run into companies with an excellent safety manager, but then the management, if they're not on board, this isn't going to necessarily go anywhere. And so, that's hard on our end, right? Where we blood, sweat, and tears into a program, and then there's either a personnel shift or a change or something, and it gets scrapped. And so for me, making sure I get FaceTime with the leadership where I'm showing them the TuMeke videos. I have noticed a shift when I show them those videos, that has been a huge marker of them understanding. And, these are busy people that don't have a lot of time to sit and look at my PowerPoint so watch this video. And like you said, it speaks for itself.
Yeah. And again, as I listen to you explain things, that word, very powerful word humility keeps coming up in my mind as I'm listening. And I'm equating it to things that I've learned even recently. There was a hero of mine who I patterned my career after is Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs and the Mike Rowe Works Foundation and all the great things he's doing. And he was recently on a podcast, the most popular podcast. And in their conversation, they came down to a point that you keep driving at. And that is, we're in an age where people prefer authenticity over authority.
That's right.
We don't want to listen to authority figures anymore, because frankly, in many cases, they haven't led us in the right places. Whereas we want authenticity. We want people to just be authentic. And there's that humility word again. And listening and actually the benefit, they see it, like you said, some people actually get choked up when they find out that you're there to help them. And it's like, they're really investing. Yeah, that's what I'm here to do. And it's really rewarding. And speaking of reward, let's face it, a lot of this comes down to dollars and cents. And we have to look at the ROI of protection and prevention. Companies often want hard numbers just to justify their investments, even though sometimes you have to explain to them, you're already spending this. You're just spending it in red ink instead of black ink. Would you like maybe to spend some black ink for a change that actually support? Well, anyway, the investments in injury prevention, you often get this sort of argument like you're asking for more money. And it's like, no, you're already spending this. Let's see if we can dial it back and you can keep more, and spend it the way you want. So how do you make a financial case for ergonomics? Do you have some ideas?
I have some. I'd love to hear your ideas because I can always use help in this area. So one thing that has helped me tremendously is TuMeke's ROI tool, their return on investment calculator tool. So as I've made my recommendations, I can do pretty quickly and easily. It allows you to select by injury type. Like you mentioned, there's many different qualifiers in there, but I'm able to pop out a number and say, listen, if we prevent one injury, this is going to be your return on investment for this item. And so seeing those numbers is tremendous because instead of, like you said, we're just spending it off, like, no, you're going to recoup this 700% year over year, 2,100% after 3 years. I mean, those numbers are excellent. And so, and then coming in there too, we kind of touched on this earlier about direct and indirect costs. But, for example, I was at a company and they told me that they were spending in the millions in 1 year on new worker training. They had lost 40% of their workforce in turnover.
Wow.
And they were just running OSHA 10s back to back to back to back. Everyone was dying. It was killing them. So I come in and say, hey, I want to do this modest program where we're going to tackle a ton of things, and they were balking at the cost. And I was like, do y'all, so understanding what are we doing here? We're going to spend millions. Why are people quitting? Are we asking those hard questions? And so again, with that prevention and that proactive mindset, instead of just someone quit, I have to hire someone else. Let's maybe get to the root. Why are 40-something% of the workforce quit? Because that's not sustainable for this business to remain open and above water. And so trying to take, getting some of that, as much data as I can from safety managers to say, what are y'all's real injuries looking like, right? What are we doing? And then we can calculate those numbers. A muscle strain, like I said, 32,000 direct, 35,000 indirect costs for a last time muscle strain. That's crazy. No ergonomics program is going to cost them $70,000, but that's just one injury, so trying to frame it that way to say, guys, we've just prevent one, but we're going to prevent dozens over the lifetime of this, so trying to explain those kind of things.
It keeps coming back. And again, I always try to use visuals whenever possible and use those terms like red ink versus black ink.
Correct.
Okay. This is expense side. You know, why are you looking at only one side of your ledger and not the other side of your ledger? Your margin is in between those two sides.
That's right.
And you've got to suppress the red ink and raise the black ink. And that's how you guys stay alive. And we all do. And yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes we see that as an artifact of the siloing of different. You and I've talked about that and encountered that. I've literally had clients who were on the benefits side, and they weren't interested in the ergonomics. They just wanted the treatment of the employees. I won't mention the employer, but they just wanted massages for everybody. And I said, that's beautiful, but wouldn't you like to just make this go away? And the response I got was, well, you know, that's the risk manager. He's down the hall from me. Maybe I'll introduce you to him. And I was like, oh my gosh, they don't communicate, and they each have their different budgets. And that's the siloing that we sometimes have to get to a level. Maybe it's the C-suite where somebody sees the big picture and, you know, they realize you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, the old saying. Well, yeah, before we wrap up, I always love to learn about any unexpected or amusing war stories. And man, some of the best ones we just can't say on this podcast. But I'd love to hear yours, some that maybe we could. Do you have any maybe amusing, maybe unexpected, or maybe one of those moments that are that we see out in the field that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Sure. I don't know how inspirational it is, but you'll laugh. So I was headed down to Atlanta to do a presentation at a location, like an educational seminar, a stretching, and do some on-site work. So I live about 5.5 hours from Atlanta. So I'm driving down, and when I travel, I've got my suitcase with my personal belongings, and I've got a huge softball bag with my cushions and mice and ergo gears, steel-toed boots, vest, and hard hat, right? So I've got all my things. Well, I'm about an hour outside of Atlanta, heading down the interstate. I hear a terrible sound, and it turns out my whole engine seized. My accelerator won't work. Horrific. Thank God I was able to pull over safely on the side of the road. You know, so this is the evening before, you know, I'm supposed to be at the quarry first thing in the morning. So as I call the tow truck, I called the plant manager. I'm freaking out, arranging a rental car. It's not available till the next morning. So I have to bump my time, which, you know, at these sites, you always start pre-shift. So they're bending over backwards for me to start now at 9:30, just awesome group. And so as I'm waiting for the tow truck to arrive or they get there, I start to unload my car. Oh, I've left my suitcase back in North Carolina. So not only is my car not working, all I have, and I'm not dressed in anything, I'm in my sweatpants and cozy shirt to drive down to the hotel. Right. And so the tow truck driver drops me at the hotel with my steel-toed boots, safety vest, and hard hat and cushions. I'm in my basically pajamas. So I have to call an Uber to take me to Target. And I said, please wait here in the parking lot. So I sprint into the store. I grab jeans, a black shirt, under things. I sprint back to the Uber. He takes me to the hotel. I'm exhausted. It's late. I collapse in bed. So the next morning, I get up and I go to put on these pants. Matt, I grabbed the wrong size and they did not button. So I am now on my way to present to a group of 40 men and do stretches. And I have to do extension and all. I mean, I am in unbuttoned jeans that are slipping down. Listen. So thank God for my safety vest. So I kind of shuffle in and I managed to, you know, they've met me before. Thankfully, I have a good relationship. So I kind of go around the room critiquing rather than demoing. Right. I point at the screen. You know, try that one. Not like that guy. Like this, but you know, and I was supposed to go on site, and I thought I can't climb ladders up onto these conveyors. Literally, you know, would give people a show that they did not expect. So luckily, I was able to get out of that. But that's my one story of it was a bit of a traumatic trip there for me.
You know what? And for those of our friends listening and watching, this is the life of the consultant on the road. Yeah. Some of my most cherished items that are still in drawers in my dressers are from those kind of stories where I was out on the road. I was hitting multiple locations and a cold front I didn't prepare for came through. Next thing I know, you know, and just bless the big box retail stores
Amen.
that are open 24/7.
Amen.
And I've hit those places at like 5 in the morning.
I have too.
And
The
like,
number of long sleeve solid layers that I have purchased.
yes, yes.
Yes.
If you don't think it can get frigid in Dallas, Texas, you haven't been in Dallas, Texas in the winter. And this cold front comes roaring through, and next thing you know, it's like, oh my gosh. And hitting that big box retail store at like 4:35 in the morning, finding long johns and stuff saved me. And so I can totally relate to what you're saying. And that is the life of the ergonomist on the road. And well, that's great. I'm glad I'm not the only one that experiences stuff
no,
like
it's nice to have somebody who can understand and relate.
Yeah, no, that's the life. So, Dr. Alicia Turner, this has been a real pleasure, and I hope it's only one of many to come. As we begin to land this plane and stick the landing, so to speak, where can everyone learn more about you? You and I share some work we do with a certain outfit. You're more than welcome to mention how people can find you and more.
Absolutely. So I've been doing work with Catamount Consulting. And so we specialize, I know you've done ergonomics with them as well and continue to. So leadership development, safety training, drug testing, hearing screening, the kit and caboodle, right? I'm just a little piece of the whole pie. And so that website's catamountconsultingllc.com, or my email there is aturner@catamountconsultingllc.com. So you can find out more information. And if you want a little bit more detail about kind of what I do and some more examples of my work, featuring TuMeke on there with the reports and things, modifiedtogether.com is my personal business that I own. And so there's information on how to contact me on there. So I'd love anybody that has questions or would like to reach out. I'm here and available.
Same thing. And Catamount is a great group. I contract with them like you do. And like you, I also have my own clients and my own individual business. So again, this is the nature of how we do our work, where I use the term guns for hire, but it's that, third parties often reach out to us and say, hey, can you go here and do this and do that? And I've been all over the U.S. and other countries because of work like that. So I hope we get a chance to do this again. But until then, I do want to remind everyone that we are going to be speaking at a Master Track Roundtable on AI ergonomics at the Applied Ergonomics Conference in Orlando, Florida, Thursday, March 20th at 10 a.m. And I hope our viewers and our listeners will come up to us. I know they're going to, that this podcast should launch before then.
Okay.
We'd love to talk with you. And I can't wait to have an opportunity for you and I to attend that event coming up.
That'd be excellent. I'm looking forward to it as well, Matt.
It's been a real pleasure, Dr. Turner. And I hope, Alicia, we can do this again.
All right. Me too. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Take good care. We'll see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.